All right, folks, ready to dive deep. Today we're looking at something super important, especially for you future civil servants prepping for those UPSC exams.
That's right.
We're talking about India's Central Armed Police Forces,
Hmm.
the CAPFs. These are the folks on the front lines, keeping our nation safe.
Absolutely. And we're going to be looking at some recent data and reports. We're going to figure out what's going on and why it matters, especially for you aspiring policymakers. What's often overlooked is that these forces face some pretty unique challenges.
Yeah.
And getting a handle on those, understanding the nuances, that's crucial for anyone, especially if you're aiming for a position where you might be making decisions that directly impact their lives.
Okay, so let's start with something that really jumped out at me from the Ministry of Home Affairs data.
Okay.
Between 2018 and 2022, 654 CAPF personnel died by suicide. That's a massive number. I mean, what's happening here?
Yeah, it is alarming. It's way higher than the national average suicide rate, significantly. And to really get why this is happening, we need to break it down. Like the CRPF, the Central Reserve Police Force, they have the highest number of suicides, followed by the BSF, Border Security Force, and the CISF, Central Industrial Security Force.
Okay, so different forces, maybe different challenges, but what are the common threads here? Like, what's actually pushing these individuals to this point?
Well, the good news is the MHA set up a task force
Okay.
to investigate exactly that. They identified three major areas: working conditions, service conditions, and personal issues. So let's start with those working conditions.
Okay.
Think about the environments these forces operate in. Hostile terrains like Naxal-affected areas, high-pressure border regions.
Right, not exactly your average 9 to 5.
No, not at all.
But is it just the tough locations?
Well, there's more to it. See, unlike the Army, they have provisions for peace postings. CAPF personnel don't always get those breaks from high-stress deployments.
Oh, I see.
That constant exposure to danger, it really takes a toll, mentally. And then on top of that, you've got the pressure of frequent deployments during festivals, elections, you name it.
So they're always on edge.
Yeah.
With very little downtime to recover. Makes sense. But what about the service conditions? I mean, serving your country, you'd think there'd be a sense of pride, recognition.
Absolutely. But unfortunately, a lot of CAPF personnel face limited career progression. They get stuck in the same rank for years. And that can be incredibly demotivating.
Oh, yeah.
You add to that this perception that the CAPFs are less prestigious than the Army, Navy, or Air Force. And then the higher ranks, they're often reserved for IPS officers.
It's like you're putting your life on the line, but your contributions aren't really being acknowledged.
Exactly.
It's a recipe for, like, resentment, disillusionment.
Exactly. And then you layer on the personal challenges. Prolonged separation from family, managing personal issues from afar. All of that contributes to stress.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I was reading one of the reports, and a significant percentage of suicides, they actually happen after personnel return home from leave. Why is that?
Yeah, that's a really important point. It kind of suggests that transitioning back to civilian life, on top of all that pent-up stress and trauma, can just be overwhelming. And then you have the stigma around mental health, especially for men. It makes it hard to reach out, to get help.
So it's this whole complex mix: demanding work, lack of recognition, the strain on personal life, and then not being able to cope.
Right.
It's a pretty bleak picture.
It is. But before we get too discouraged, there are efforts being made to address these issues, and that's what we're going to explore next.
Okay, so we've talked about the challenges, but are there any solutions? I mean, what's being done to actually help to improve the well-being of CAPF personnel?
Well, one thing that's showing some promise is technology.
Oh,
Like at CRPF, they launched this app, Hey. It simplifies leave applications, cuts down on all that bureaucratic red tape, makes it easier for personnel to actually get the time off they need.
that's good. That sounds like a good step.
Yeah.
Anything else happening on that front?
Oh, yeah, definitely. There's more and more focus on mental health support. The COPF, they've got mental health counselors now,
Okay.
and they started a buddy system. So personnel are looking out for each other, providing peer support.
The buddy system, that sounds like a simple idea,
Yeah.
but really powerful, right? Creating that environment where it's okay to talk about what you're going through, get help.
Exactly. It's about changing the culture. And other forces are stepping up too. The CISF, they've got this mental health championship program. It's to train supervisors, help them recognize, those early warning signs of mental health issues.
Wow.
Plus, there's a 24/7 helpline, Project Man, for anyone who needs someone to talk to.
It's really good to see these steps being taken. But we were talking about some deep-rooted issues, right? That those systemic issues, are those being addressed too?
Yeah, that's where things get a little bit trickier.
Yeah.
There's a lot of discussion about workload management, like maybe making sure CAPF personnel get postings in peaceful areas every so often.
Oh, right. To give them a chance to, like, de-stress, recharge.
Exactly. That could go a long way in preventing burnout.
Hmm. Makes sense. What about that whole issue of career progression and, the perception that CAPFs are less prestigious?
Yeah, those are tougher nuts to crack. There's been talk about improving career advancement within the CAPS themselves
Okay.
and making sure senior positions aren't only going to IPS officers. But these kind of changes, they take time
Yeah.
and political will.
Yeah. A lot of work to be done on that front. What about the personal side of things, like supporting families, helping with that transition back to civilian life?
Yeah, well, people are starting to realize how crucial families are.
Right.
There are provisions now for families to stay with personnel in certain cases, and there's been talk about making family visits more regular.
It makes sense. That strong family support can make all the difference. But what about when it's time to retire? How do we make sure that transition is smooth?
That's where equipping personnel with skills for post-retirement livelihoods comes in.
Okay.
Things like beekeeping or mushroom cultivation, skills that can provide income, give them purpose.
Right. So it's not just about what happens during service, but preparing them for what comes after.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that these aren't just jobs.
Yeah.
These are lives, families, futures.
Yeah, really important point.
Mm.
So we've covered a lot here. What are the key takeaways for our listeners,
Mhm.
especially those prepping for the UPSC exams?
Well, I'd say the most important thing is to go beyond just memorizing the facts, the figures.
Right.
You really got to understand how complex this issue is, the human cost, the systemic challenges, and the potential solutions.
Yeah, because this deep understanding, it can inform your answers, your essays, your interviews, right? And ultimately, how you approach public service. And this isn't just some, abstract policy issue. This is about real people, families. They're making sacrifices for our safety. And as future policymakers, we've got a responsibility to think about their well-being, to consider that in decisions we make.
Couldn't agree more. This should be like a starting point for you, to research further, stay informed, and think critically about how to address this challenge.
Absolutely. So as you continue on your UPSC journey, we want to leave you with this thought. What else can be done? To really improve the well-being of our CAPF personnel and make sure they get the support and recognition they deserve.
It's a crucial question. And remember their sacrifices, that's what keeps our nation safe. It's really on all of us to ensure their well-being.
Absolutely. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and keep diving deep.